Hello. This article is entitled 18 Shocks at Frankfurt. Sometimes it's the place that makes the speech. Gettysburg, for instance, or Queen Elizabeth I standing at Tilbury Docks, or Napoleon on the steps of the Cour du Cheval Blanc at Fontainebleau. For Christine Lagarde, President of the ECB, the clue was also in the location. The Institute for Monetary and Fiscal Stability in Frankfurt. Because this speech was really about the collapse of stability. Of course, Christine Lagarde framed the speech as continuity. I quote, "None of us can resolve the uncertainty about how the war in Iran will play out. But what I can do is convey that our response will be rooted in our monetary policy strategy, which is well equipped to help us navigate this." End quote. Lagarde's speech, by contrast, was structured almost entirely around the argument that the ECB does have a framework, indeed does have a strategy, it is prepared. But in the time-honoured words of Lance Corporal Jack Jones, don't panic. Lagarde sought to reassure us that whatever the fallout, we could rely on the ECB and by inference, central banks to maintain stability. But take a look at the language. Lagarde's use of the quotation by Bertrand Russell, for instance, how to live without uncertainty and yet without being paralysed by hesitation. The phrase comes from Bertrand Russell's Unpopular Essays of 1950. And the way that Lagarde borrows it is illuminating. Russell was writing about individuals navigating a post-religious and philosophically uncertain world. He was making a humanist argument. Lagarde transports the noble cause to a central bank, and she transposes it to a technocratic policy in uncertainty. Russell was writing about courage required to live without God. Lagarde uses it to describe the courage required to set interest rates without complete data. And rhetorically, by implication, central banks represent the new faith. Furthermore, Lagarde emphasises the Russell quotation. She tells us she has used it before, 4 years ago indeed. And again, the implied meaning is that 4 years ago, central banks was indeed the bedrock of our faith. And now? Well, 2 more points on her language. First, the cliff edge metaphor. Buried in the technical analysis is a image, when she says, a further cliff edge is also approaching. A stark piece of imagery, I think. And then, of course, her use of the word shock. Lagarde uses the word shock 18 times. That's extraordinary in a speech of this length and in Frankfurt. She mentions the war once, but shock 18 times. The human catastrophe, it seems, is euphemised, but the economic consequences are almost unimaginable. It feels like she's trying to use shock in a technical sense, without realising that every time she does so, the emotional echoes are there. The audience feels the word. The 18 shocks land, they reverberate. Indeed, there is something seismic about the repeated use. A seismic shock is what happens when tectonic plates collide. The deep foundational structures of the earth come together, and suddenly with a violent shift. The real message here is that the old order has passed. As Napoleon remarked, "Soldiers of my old guard, I bid you farewell."